Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to go ahead and jump back over to some more Excalibur comics. Now, we're going to cover a three-part storyline called The Dream Nails. Now, for me personally, The Dream Nails is just a storyline to help establish the idea of Kitty Pryde getting with Pete Wisdom. Now, here's the thing, because around his time in Marvel Comics, Kitty Pryde was not with Colossus. Colossus had officially left the X-Men, joined the Acolytes, and the Acolytes were a group of characters who were praising Magneto like he was some kind of god, but also kind of taking care of Magneto because Charles Xavier had shut down the mind of Magneto. And so with Colossus no longer with the X-Men, but also kind of moving farther away from Kitty Pryde, it allowed Kitty Pryde the chance to go ahead and officially move on to somebody else. And of course, that would be Pete Wisdom. Now, technically, in our last video, we saw it coming. Like, the way they were acting, you can say like, yeah, y'all two gonna get together very soon, knowing Marvel Comics. Now, the storyline does start off in Excalibur issue number 88. And now we get an opening page where we pick up with some kind of alien. Now, this alien is technically locked away, but apparently while being locked away, it had gained some kind of infection. And so with that infection, it's slowly dying off. But you did have this alien begin to laugh. And the reason why, because apparently it had killed a soldier while being held captive in its cell. That soldier believed it was perfectly safe to go inside, but unfortunately that soldier had died. And so we're kind of left to wonder, what kind of alien is this? And what kind of facility are they locked away in? But now we can transition over to Pete Wisdom. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, for Pete Wisdom, he was working for an organization better known as Black Air. And Black Air around his time in Marvel Comics was a new organization that had just replaced an old one better known as WHO. Now, WHO had stand for Weird Happening Organization. They would go around the world to investigate weird things happening across the world. Now, they're no longer around. They have been officially replaced by Black Air. And for Pete Wisdom, he works for Black Air. Now, for Pete, he's also with Excalibur. And the reason why, because they're supposed to figure out what's going on with Genosha. And technically, what's going on with Genosha is not really important for today's storyline. But for Pete Wisdom, he's with Excalibur on Muir Island, their home base. And so he does ask the computer to connect to his answering machine. Now, when he does that, the very last message comes from a friend better known as Culley. Now, for Culley, it's him saying like, hey, Pete, I need some medical attention, the private kind, but also I need to tell you something very important about our mutual employer. And of course, he's talking about Black Air. Now, here's the problem, because for Pete Wisdom, he does not really have a strong bond with the members of Excalibur just yet. And so when you have Pete go ask Brian, like, hey, can I borrow your jet? Like, can I borrow the Midnight Runner to go over to London to go see my friend? You have, you have Brian say, go play in traffic, basically saying no, but also like, hey, go away and stay away. Now, for Pete Wisdom, he's really trying his best to hopefully change the mind of Brian to allow him to use the Midnight Runner. Now, luckily for Kitty Pryde, she is there. And here's the thing, because Kitty Pryde knows how to actually control, how to pilot the Midnight Runner. Pete does not, which was another reason why Brian said no. But with Kitty Pryde now going, and because she knows how to pilot the aircraft, you have Brian say yes, and the two of them leave to go find this mysterious friend of Pete. Now, we also have to remember that around this time in Marvel Comics, Moira McTaggart is dying. And the reason why, because of the legacy virus. Now, we have talked a lot about the legacy virus. It came from the future thanks to Strife, and you have Strife release the virus into the present day. And the thing is, the virus was only going after mutants. That was it. But now it's going after humans as well. Now, technically, it's only one human, and that would be Moira McTaggart, and that is really it. But you had the word get out about the virus to the public, and that was a major problem for the X-Men because their main goal was to make sure the public did not find out about the virus, because if they did, you're going to have humans hate on mutants even more, because that virus was originally only going after mutants, but now it's no longer just going after mutants, it's now going after humans. And so now you have the humans blame the mutants for the idea of the legacy virus. Now, here's the problem though, because Trish Tilby was the one who had told the entire world about the legacy virus. But the problem was, again, the X-Men want to keep everything hush hush. How in the world did that info get out into the public? And you have Moira McTaggart say, you know what? It all makes sense now, because for Charles Xavier, his computer, and Moira McTaggart, her computer, they are connected, but they are connected by a satellite. But when it came to Charles Xavier, his home was being attacked by the Phalanx, and he wanted to make sure the Phalanx would not be able to access his information. And so he tried his best to wipe his computer clean, but also he wiped out security as well. And so for a hacker, they now had easy access into the satellite over to Moira McTaggart's computer. And so with that hacker, they were able to collect information about the legacy virus. Now, for Kitty Pryde and also Pete Wisdom, they're heading over to London. And really, for Kitty Pryde, she's kind of enjoying the idea of being with Pete Wisdom. And the reason why, because with him being a spy, with him working for Black Air, she's kind of seeing all the different benefits a spy can truly have. Like, for example, there are secret hangars around London that Black Air owns. And to the public, they're not really hangars. They're different types of facilities. So for Kitty Pryde, it's kind of cool that they now have a place to place the Midnight Runner without the possibility of it being taken away. But I also like the idea of these two characters kind of hanging out, because we're slowly seeing the two characters come together. But it's also like Pete Wisdom and also Kitty Pryde kind of showing us that their relationship at the moment is not that strong, because for Pete, he's kind of like, hey, Kitty, you could have stayed behind at the Midnight Runner. But it's her saying, like, let me get this straight. You're going to run around all London by yourself with no kind of backup and also kind of leave me bored in the Midnight Runner. No, I'm coming with you, but also I can possibly help you. Now, you do have the two characters head over to the home of Culley. The problem is that when they walk into his home, it's completely wrecked, but also there is a message on the wall. So it kind of shows something very serious is going on here when it comes to Culley. Now, back on Muir Island, we see Rory Campbell and also Brian having a conversation. Now, really, I want to focus more on Rory here. And here's the reason why. Because for Rory, he's very worried of the possibility of becoming a character known as Ahab. Now, Ahab was a character from an alternate timeline, better known as Days of Future Past. Now, in that timeline, Ahab would capture mutants and use those mutants as hounds, as a way to hunt down other mutants while working for the Sentinels. Now, for Ahab, again, that was an alternate timeline. But for Rory, he saw a possibility in his future where he does become Ahab. And so ever since he saw that, he has been trying his best to make sure there is no way he'll turn into Ahab. Now, with all that being said, we do learn that Brian was able to build a room to allow Rory to interrogate different people. Now, technically, is Rory believing that he could be like Charles Xavier, where you have Charles trying his best to fix the mind of Sabretooth? Is Rory saying, I can fix the mind of a character known as Spore? Now for Spore, he had the ability to play with people's emotions, to make them more aggressive, to kind of make them become killers or possibly attack each other or him. Just an evil person. And so right now for Rory, he's kind of hoping in the possibility he could fix the mind of Spore. Now, for Kitty Pryde and Pete Wisdom, they go over to a bar to kind of gather more information about Culley. Now, you're probably wondering, like, okay, why would you go to this bar? Well, this bar is only a bar for spies to go to. So all the different spies out there in Great Britain, they head over to this bar to talk to one another. But it's also kind of Pete hoping to get some kind of information about Culley, where you do have somebody walk up to both Pete and Kitty to inform him like, hey, listen, Culley is dead. But before we're able to learn more about that, we have to transition over to Moira MacTaggert, Nightcrawler, Megan, and also Douglock. Now, really, it's them kind of looking at the DNA structure of Moira MacTaggert to get the better idea of how in the world did she get the legacy virus. Because originally, the virus was only going after mutants. And the reason why, because it had the ability to attach itself to the X gene that only mutants have. But when it comes to Moira MacTaggert, she does not have the X gene. So why in the world does she have the legacy virus? But on top of that, why only her? Out of all the humans across the world, why only her? Now, here's my thing, guys, because I believe that this was Marvel back then, even playing around with the idea of turning Moira MacTaggert into a mutant. But unfortunately, it did not happen. Now, getting back over to Kitty Pryde and Pete Wisdom, they see the dead body of Culley. Now, here's the thing, because for Culley, he was stationed at a base called Dream Nails, and apparently he was the man in charge of security. Now, you do have the guy tell Pete and Kitty, like, hey, your friend here died by some kind of disease, but Black Air is trying their best to make sure it all stays hush-hush on what kind of disease that had just killed off Culley. Now, once you do have Pete and Kitty Pryde leave the building after seeing the dead body of his friend, they then get attacked by different people who work for Black Air. And so it kind of shows that Black Air is right now trying their best to keep everything hush-hush. Like, hey, listen, y'all could not get out with the info that you had just discovered. But with Kitty Pryde and Pete Wisdom both being mutants and knowing how to fight, they were able to take those guys out that were sent there by Black Air. But it now tells Pete he needs to continue his whole investigation to figure out what exactly is going on right now with Black Air. But as we get into issue number 89, we pick back up with Kitty Pryde and also Pete Wisdom once again, and you have the two characters now staying at the bar that's made for spies to go to, because they're well protected inside that bar. Now, for Pete and also Kitty Pryde, while they're having a conversation with one another, you didn't have this guy walk up, and his name is Jardine. And yes, I did look on the internet to make sure that name is correct, because for a while there I thought it was Jardine. But for Jardine, he saw, hey, listen, I have some info about what exactly happened to Culley. So come back to my office with me and I'll explain everything that I had just discovered. But getting back over to Muir Island, we see Nightcrawler being confronted by his girlfriend, Amanda Sefton. Now, Amanda is technically part of Excalibur. Amanda is technically also Nightcrawler's adoptive sister. But anyways, though, you do have her stop by and you do have the two characters kiss. Now, you have Nightcrawler inform Amanda about what Rory is currently up to with his whole interrogation room. Now, Amanda also knows about the dark secret of Rory, the whole idea that they saw a glimpse into his future, the possibility of him becoming a Hab. And so this is her now kind of wondering, is this the beginning of him going down that dark path where he does turn into that dark character? And so as we transition over to Rory, we see him beginning his interrogation on Spore. And I find it really funny. And the reason why, because, okay, for Rory, his main goal is to get into the mind of Spore. And he kind of realize what kind of person Spore is, because Spore has to be in control of every single type of situation. But what happens when somebody else is in control? And so you have Rory at first kind of list out all the different things that Spore has done to other people to kind of show that Spore has to be in control. But what happens when he begins to list out all the bad things done to Spore? And so you have Rory say, you know what, Spore, let's go ahead and dive into your past. Yeah, let's do that. And so you have Rory bring up the fact that his father had killed off his mother. Now for Spore, all this time he believed that his mother had just ran away because his dad told him that. But in reality, no, his dad killed his mother. And so it's getting into the mind of Spore in the most messed up type of way. Now, for Kitty, Pete, and also Jardine, they do regroup at Jardine's office. And when they do, they kind of go over all the different pieces of information they had gathered so far. Now, one of the things they have learned so far is a line said by Culley, and it said, "Easy Tiger." Now, it's a code word technically used as a way to say that, hey, we have some alien stuff going on over here. So Dream Nail, the facility that Culley was working at, was most likely keeping some alien stuff locked away. Now, as we saw in the opening page of the storyline, that is true. And so now for our heroes, their main goal is to get inside that facility to learn more about what Dream Nails is all about, but also what Black Air has locked away inside that facility. But while you have Pete walk out of the room, you have Kitty ask a tad bit more about, Pete wisdom from Jardine. And you have Jardine tell Kitty Pryde everything he knows about Pete. And it kind of shows that Pete is a great guy, where of course you have Kitty Pryde begin to wonder more about Pete in a way of possibly getting with him. Now, for a brief moment, we have to transition back over to Moira McTaggart as we continue the whole idea of the legacy virus. And when it comes to Megan and also Douglock, they had used their own abilities as a way to kind of look into more of a reason why the legacy virus would affect Moira McTaggart. And really, by the end of this section, we learn that there is no actual reason. Like, basically, the virus is attached to her for some unknown reason. And so it's them saying like, well, it does seem like the virus just went to you for no good reason. It's just spreading across the world. And so we have to move on and get back over to Pete and also Kitty Pryde. Now, while you have Pete and Kitty Pryde heading over to Dream Nail's facility, you have Pete and Kitty kind of get into another argument. Now, this argument is really more about the idea that Pete wants to go inside the facility on his own, and Kitty says no. But it's also Kitty kind of expressing that she knows the true side of Pete, that he's not just some guy who does not care about anything at all, that Pete does truly care about, other people. And so it kind of shows the two characters are now beginning to understand one another, but also the possibility of them getting together as well. And so the next few pages are really more of us seeing Kitty Pryde, but also Pete Wisdom working together and using their abilities, but also skills they have picked up over the years to kind of help them break into the Dream Nails facility. Now, while they're breaking into the facility, they do find this computer where it should have all the information that they are technically looking for. And so with that computer, we do learn that, okay, for Culley, he did work here at Dream Nail's facility, but he was kind of being kept as a security guard to watch over a certain group of aliens. Now, these aliens, they carried a special kind of bacteria that does affect humans. Now, for Culley, he did have some gear on to protect him, but the problem was you had one of those aliens bite through that gear. And so, of course, when he got bitten by that alien, he was also infected by that bacteria. So that is how he died, by some kind of disease. And when it came to Culley, he knew that he could not go over to Black Air, because if he did, Black Air will just turn him into some kind of lab rat. And so his main goal was kind of get the word out there about what Black Air is doing at this facility. But this chapter truly does end with a bunch of guards just rushing into the room. And when they do, they kind of put Kitty and also Pete in a position where Kitty's not really able to get to Pete in time to save his life. But if she does move, they're going to kill him. But if he moves, they're going to kill her. And so she has no choice but to go ahead and just leave him behind. And you then have Pete get knocked out, which of course leads us into the final chapter of this storyline. And so now we have to dive into the final chapter, issue number 90. And issue number 90 was a double-sized issue, so of course it does have some extra pages as well. Now, with Pete Wisdom now technically being a prisoner of Black Air, they had assigned a special person to kind of deal with him. And that would be a character known as Shrine. Now, for Shrine, he is a telepath, so it allows him to go into the mind of Pete Wisdom, but to also kind of make him relive a lot of different moments of his life, and most likely the worst moments. Now, here is the thing, because you also had Black Air and also Shrine supposedly give Pete Wisdom a special kind of virus. And it's called the Black Eagle. Now, the Black Eagle came from that bacteria from the alien race that Black Air had captured. We also learn the name of this alien race, and they're known as the Uncreated. Now, the Uncreated will appear a few more times in our coverage over the X-Men, but also in our coverage over the cosmic side of Marvel Comics as well. But with that being said, as the Black Air begins to eat away at the body of Pete Wisdom, it's also Shrine kind of hoping to go into the mind of Pete Wisdom to cause him pain, to basically relive the worst moments of his life. And apparently they also gave Pete some kind of device to cancel out his powers as well. Now, for Kitty Pryde, it's just her trying her best to stay away from all the different security guards of Black Air. But while trying to do that, you do have her run into this room. Now, this room is full of all these different alien artifacts that Black Air has been keeping the entire time, but we're now kind of getting into the idea of the possibility of Black Air being around much longer than our heroes know of. But on top of that, Black Air might know more things than our heroes know about different kinds of alien races. And you'll see what I mean as we go through the rest of this storyline. Now, for Moira McTaggart, it's just still her kind of getting over the fact that she has the legacy virus, but you also have Wolfbane appear. Now, a long time ago, like in the early days of Chris Claremont's X-Men, you had Wolfbane technically be adopted by Moira McTaggart. So it's kind of like a mom and daughter relationship here. And so for Wolfbane, is her kind of finding out like, hey, you know, my adoptive mother is dying. I need to go see how she is doing. And so it's Wolfbane and Moira McTaggart being able to spend some time with one another. But getting back over to Kitty Pryde, you have Kitty Pryde walk into this room where she finds all these different alien artifacts. Now, one of the artifacts is a phalanx. It's a phalanx that had affected a scroll. And so we're getting into the idea of the Black Air organization knowing more about the phalanx than the X-Men does. Like, for example, they also have a head of a brood as well. But they also have this random spider alien that could go after people who have the X gene. And of course, talking about mutants. Now, for Kitty Pryde, she's then confronted by another group of aliens that are still alive. And these are called the Uncreated. Now, the Uncreated are the ones who had helped Black Air create that brand new virus, better known as Black Eagle. Now, as we transition back over to Pete Wisdom, you have Pete just being basically tortured by Shrine, where you have Shrine just continue to dive into the mind of Pete Wisdom, picking up different moments of horrible things Pete has saw over time in his life. Like, for example, where he had to go out of his way to collect an artifact, an alien artifact that was being kept by a cult. Now, this cult had killed themselves by poison. So when it came to Pete arriving there, all he found was all of these dead bodies just laying around the item that he was there to collect. Now, Shrine does not stop there, because he also dives into the mind mind of the moment where Pete had lost his mother, because his mother was waiting for him to be picked up. But apparently some random guy with a gun went around and killed off a bunch of people, including his mother. So continuing the idea of just diving deeper and deeper into the mind of Pete Wisdom. But back on Muir Island, you have another conversation going on between Amanda and also Rory Campbell. Now, it's really more of Amanda kind of expressing that she's kind of worried for Rory, because she kind of wonders of the possibility of him becoming Ahab. Now, for Rory, he does try his best to convince her that most likely it will not happen at all. But the thing is, he does tell her that the day he no longer cares for mutants is the day he might become Ahab. But for right now, he cares for mutants too much to turn to that kind of man. And so it's him trying his best to ease the mind of Amanda. But the whole problem is that that possibility is still out there of him becoming Ahab, being a guy who truly hunts down mutants. But now it's time for us to kind of dive into the origin of the Uncreated. Now, the Uncreated is an alien race we're going to see a few more times in our coverage over the X-Men. But the Uncreated was originally called the Works. Now, they were a peaceful group. And the thing was, they believed that they were created by a god, or really the god. But then after a while, they kind of got tired of how they were living, and they also wanted to meet this god. Now, when it came to the Works, or the Uncreated, they left their home world and found a being that they had believed to be the god. And so you had the Uncreated kill off that god just like that. The problem was that when you had these creatures go over to different planets, they kind of realized that you had different groups of people believe in different types of gods. And so for the Uncreated, we kind of got to the idea that their main goal was to kill off all the religions across the world, or the universe, sorry. And so for the Uncreated, that was their main goal. Now, this group right here was only one small group of the Uncreated who had arrived on Earth. Except when they had crashed on Earth, they were captured by Black Air. And so that explains why they are here. But also, the whole idea of the brand new virus, it came from them, the bacteria that they currently carry. Now, for Pete and also Shrine, you still have them going on with one another, where you have Shrine just going deeper and deeper into the mind of Pete. Now, once you do have Shrine find a certain memory, he believes once again he can use that memory as a way to attack the mind of Pete. But he is incorrect, because for Pete, this was not a bad moment at all. Now, before we continue, we have to bring up the fact that this entire room is full of that bacteria that's full of Black Eagle, that brand new virus. So now Shrine is possibly being affected by that virus. But either way, for Shrine, he still believes that he can use his brand new memory that he had just found as a way to attack the mind of Pete. But he can't, because for Pete, it wasn't a bad moment. Pete just killed off a bunch of terrorists who were doing some bad things. And so for Pete, he's kind of like, no, I want you to watch what I did to those people. And for Shrine, he begins to freak out. But I want to transition back over to Rory, because for Rory, as he continues to interrogate Spore, we're getting into the idea that Spore is not really being affected by what Rory is trying to do. Like, yes, Rory can continue to bring up all these different bad moments. But for Spore, what he's doing right now is using his ability on Rory, or technically getting into the mind of Rory. And let me explain, because we're now seeing Rory bring out the more aggressive side of him, where he's now getting very upset with whatever Spore says. But it's also Spore kind of playing mind games with Rory about what he overheard when it came to Rory's and Amanda's conversation. And so it kind of shows the possibility of Rory now beginning to fall down the wrong path of the possibility of becoming Ahab. So now we have to jump back and forth between two different settings. So for example, we now have Rory getting more upset when it comes to Spore in his mind games, but you have Shrine also realizing that he's no longer in control of this entire situation, that now technically Pete is. And so you do have Spore get beat down by Rory, and you do have Pete being able to affect the mind of Shrine to defeat him and break out of his interrogation room. And so this kind of leads into the rest of the book where technically you have Pete being able to escape. He finds Kitty. You have the two characters being able to catch up with one another. But after doing that, they decide to go ahead and download all the information they can from this base, but also blow the place up and get away. And the book does kind of end on the note where technically we see the two of them on the Midnight Runner making out with one another. So we're now establishing the whole idea of their relationship. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.